Hello and welcome, movie lovers, to It's Been Real, the podcast where we dissect films purely for the love of it without any formal training. I'm Graham Hack.
And I'm Hannah Murray.
Today, we're breaking down, covering, diving into Dead Poet Society. Let's get real.
And here we go.
I got a bad feeling about this.
But you have heard of me.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Wax on, wax off.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
Life finds a way.
The hard is what makes it great.
And in this moment, I swear, we are infinite.
So, let's just get into it. We are breaking down Dead Poet Society. Came out in 1989. Director was Peter Weir. It had a few Oscar nominations. We had Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Robin Williams' performance, and it ended up winning Best Original Screenplay. Tom Schulman is the writer there. And then, of course, a stacked cast with Robin Williams, very young Ethan Hawke, Robert Sean Leonard as Neil Perry, and a bunch of other people. So yeah, getting into it. What were your thoughts, Graham? I know you've seen this before, and this was my first watch.
Yeah, this is my second. Well, it's not my second time, maybe my third time. I don't know. I've seen it a couple times, but not like a ton. Yeah, I love this movie. This is one of those movies that it's a great story, it's great writing, but really it highlights the brilliance of Robin Williams in so many ways. There's so much else in this movie that is also great and brilliant, but nothing stands out more than Robin Williams. I'm a sucker for a Robin Williams movie of any sort. I think he is just a genius, and this movie really brings out the depth of his acting skills and the heart that he can act with. Yeah, it's a masterclass. And watching it again last night, yeah, it just hit all the feels. It makes you think, makes you feel. Yeah, it really hits a lot of things it's just a well done movie.
It was very well done. Yeah, Robin Williams is definitely the highlight, I feel like, of the movie, which wasn't a surprise going in. I knew that watching anything with Robin Williams was going to be a joy. But seeing him particularly play this inspirational teacher role, I wrote down at one point, I was like, we are also Keating's students. Because it really felt like, yes, he's inspiring these boys, but he's also, you just feel so connected with him watching it. Like he's holding court and the audience is just as much as anyone on screen, just like enamored by Williams.
You feel like when he sits in the middle of the classroom and he's like, huddle up. And they all, if you feel like you lean in with them as he's talking. It just captures you in that way.
Apparently, I did a little bit of research, as is my nature. So apparently, Robin Williams was struggling a little bit in the role at first because it is a little bit more serious. And this was before he had done some of the more serious roles like Good Will Hunting. So he was struggling a little bit to find his footing there. And Peter Weir suggested he do some improv. So they were going to do a scene. He was like, well, what would you want to teach? And Robin Williams said Shakespeare. So they did the whole scene with him doing the John Wayne and Marlon Brando impersonations, teaching Shakespeare. That was Robin Williams improvising. And after that, he said that he felt a lot more comfortable in the role and was able to find his footing. So I wrote down during that scene, I was like, Robin Williams is holding court here. He was just so, that was him at his most Robin Williams, I think, in the whole movie. And so it made a lot of sense to learn that was improv, but
that does make sense. And it was something that I'd actually forgotten about until I rewatched it last night. I forgot about that scene. And I was like, okay, here's the classic Robin Williams bit where he's doing, this is his Good Morning Vietnam, his Mrs. Doubtfire or whatever, just doing his voices, doing his impersonations. He's not having to be anything other than him in this scene. And yet it works so well.
Yeah, he is phenomenal. I will say I particularly connected with this movie because Walt Whitman is a staple in my household. And I didn't like. I knew obviously going in they were going to talk about poetry and poets. I didn't realize Walt Whitman specifically was going to get talked about so much. So the first time, like within the first 20 minutes, he quotes Walt Whitman. I'm like, oh, Walt Whitman. And then he continuously throughout the film just keeps referencing Walt Whitman. We have like a one of the old copies of Leaves of Grass from like 1912 or something on our bookshelf. We have a few Walt Whitman books. So I don't know, just hearing Robin Williams, who's one of my favorite actors, talking about this poet that is one of my favorite poets. Yeah, it was just really felt like worlds colliding. It really resonated with me in particular. And then
Yeah.
some of the Yop scene where where he has Ethan Hawke come up to Yop in front of the class, and they do that whole bit where he's like, getting him to just say these poetic lines off the top of his head. Oh my God. That scene I wrote down, I was like, why did this scene make me cry? That one had me tearing up, and I didn't even know why. It was just so good. Ethan
It's
Hawke
so
was
well,
great,
no, it is.
and Robin Williams was phenomenal. And it has this like, I don't know. So this is the scene where with Robin Williams stepping back and just like looking at Ethan Hawke kind of like step into this confidence in that moment. I don't know. It just broke me a little bit.
That's actually the first scene that I wrote notes down about while I was watching it because it struck me that hard as well. Yeah, it's just such a great moment of that's the quintessential teacher moment, right? That's what every great teacher dreams of, having a moment like that where you've got this student who doesn't know what they have inside them. They can't unlock it. They don't even think there's anything there. And you're doing something to unlock it. And then they realize what they actually have, what they're capable of. Yeah. And he can't even speak, he can't get words out. He thinks whatever ideas he has are dumb or stupid or whatever it is. He just doesn't think he has anything there. And then he just takes him on this journey that forces him to start doing things. It just makes him super uncomfy. But as he's going through it, he realizes that, oh, yeah, I actually have words and I have deep feelings. And he actually comes up with this insane poem, right? That he's just come up with out of the blue. I'm sitting here thinking, like, I couldn't write something like that if I sat there for, a week trying to write something. I couldn't. And he had it in, those are things that he's feeling, right? And that's the essence of poetry, right? It's these things that are just your life that you're putting into words. And he's just, imparted that onto his student there. So good.
So good. Yeah, the characters I felt like were so well written and so diverse in personality. Like Ethan Hawke's character, I was finding myself during the movie trying to figure out which character, Robin Williams or Keating might have been most like when he was at Welton. Like when I first started, I was like, oh, I think so. Like he's probably identifying with the Neil Perry character because that kind of seemed to be the main central figure, at least from the beginning, right? And then
Right.
at a point, he's calling out Ethan Hawke's character, Todd Anderson, for being this kind of more quiet, thinking his beliefs are worthless and things like that. So like, oh, maybe he sees himself in Todd Anderson. Maybe it's this quiet, kind of character that he resonates with more. And then at another part, I found myself going, I don't know, maybe he was more of this Charlie class clown kind of guy. So like I never was able to pinpoint and identify which of these characters Keating might have been most like when he was in their shoes. But the fact that I couldn't pinpoint it, and that the whole time I was finding moments where he was connecting with these characters in a way that I thought he might have been identifying with them, just speaks to like, I don't know, that they're all so different, and yet Keating is able to connect with each of them on such a personal level that you think that he might actually be identifying with the character. Like it's just so well done.
Yes. It's reasonable to conclude that I think that there is a piece of each one of them in him, and vice versa. And they each have a part of his personality. Because I think there's definitely, like, you're right. I think Neil's character is one that he has a lot more genuine moments with, where they're like talking eye to eye on things. He's not having to pull anything out of Neil in the same way. It's more so like helping Neil deal with the exterior things going on in his life, but the actual like love of this thing the desire to do it, the gift, that those things they're speaking like equals. But at the same time, yes, then you've got Charlie, who's this rebel, um, and you start to think maybe, well, you know, there's some of that there too. Obviously, even just the way that he's teaching, and
Right.
doing things, he has no problem, ruffling some feathers and doing things. I think he enjoys doing things that make people turn their head and think what's wrong.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that makes it's well written in that way, that this ensemble of kids, um, is sort of a piece of him split up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you wanna talk about some scenes?
Yeah, let's talk about some scenes.
Let's talk about some scenes. The
There's
next
so
one that I've
many.
got, I know, no, there really are, there really are. The next one I've got is the walking scene,
Mhm.
um, in the courtyard. Just really, really enjoy that scene. It's this he constantly, I mean, we see it throughout. He's taking his students outside the parameters of the classroom. He wants to get them moving. He wants to get them out and about, like, and to change the traditional, you know, setup for how they're learning. And then he's gone and he just has puts them in this setup, and he has them start walking, and then they start doing their thing, and then he points out the fact that they all started walking in their own way, and he does it in his classic, Robin Williams form, where he starts mocking them almost in the
Mhm.
way, and but as he does it and it's funny and they're laughing about it, he still brings it home to this point of, you guys were all walking differently, and then you guys sort of gravitated towards each other and started all walking the same, and it's so easy to do that. And then obviously brings out the point of, you walk at your own pace, your own gait, if you will. It's so easy to get drawn into what everyone else is doing, but don't, stand true to what you're doing. And then he has them all do it. And then you've got Charlie's character, even, who decides not to walk, right? And it's like
Yep.
perfectly actually embodying what he's trying to teach. I just think that's such a good scene, and you see that the other teachers and stuff are noticing, what's going on. What's another one of those head turning, things from elsewhere, but such an effective concept. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a really, really cool scene.
I love that scene. I love too that in that he was able to make fun of them, but still do it in an endearing way. Like, I remember
Yes.
watching it thinking, only Robin Williams can, like, actively make fun of his students in this movie and it not sound mean or harsh. Like it's more of a poking fun of teasing. It even says, like, I didn't bring you up here to, make fun of you. I have a point, and he ties it back into the lecture. But even when he was kind of making fun of them, it didn't feel too mean. It's kind of just pointing out things that make them them, right? I don't
Right.
know. I always think it's nice when characters are able to poke fun at people in a way that's not just putting them down. I think it's a delicate balance to walk that some fail at. But Robin Williams has never particularly struggled with that. But
Right.
I also thought later, right, when we know what's happening with Keating, we have his office all packed up and he looks out the window and there's the Latin class going outside. Like, you see his
Yeah.
impact, not just on he hasn't
Yes.
just impacted the students, and it might seem like such a small thing, right, that they're kind of having the same lecture, he's just kinda
Yes.
speaking Latin and they're walking outside instead of doing it in the classroom, so it's not that different, but it's still these little tiny influences he was able to have, and it wasn't just isolated to these few students, right, it was more impactful than that, um
Yes. No, that's I wrote that. That's another one that I wrote down for later, that scene. It's a small moment, but you open up at the beginning, so, and he's talking to the Latin professor. His name is McAllister. The character's name is McAllister. And yeah, they go back and forth. They actually quote some poetry back to each other, so
Mhm.
you get that McAllister's not an unlearned man, and he's not someone who is he's not just like a, you know, he's not someone who's just like math science, like get on with your day type of deal. Like,
Right.
obviously, and he teaches Latin, so there's some language and some he's teaching a dead language, right?
Mhm.
So there's got to be a little bit more going on there. But they have this discussion about whether he's a skeptic, and he calls himself a realist.
Mhm.
McAllister does. But then they have that exchange where they're quoting poetry, and you can see that they both enjoy the quoting of poetry to make their own points.
Mhm.
And I think that's a cool scene that you see that there's something there, but McAllister's not quite willing to go to that. He's marching to the same steps as everyone else around him
Mhm.
because that's what's easiest, and is maybe even believing in that. But you see by the end, after seeing, what Keating's character does throughout it, that he has now come around and is doing some of the things that Keating was doing. And that's just a subtle thing. But it is cool. And to your point, it speaks to the impact that goes beyond even just his own class.
Mhm.
It has ripples.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, there's so much to digest here. I'm like, I want to talk about all of it. I actually wrote down, I think, a line at least from every scene in this movie. So, I will say one of the things that I did like, away from the performances and the writing, those are like, I think the two strongest points of this movie were the performances and the writing, but there are also other subtler things that I really enjoyed about it. And they did it in that way that doesn't detract, right? Like every good drummer knows how to drum in a way that doesn't overpower the rest of the music. So I feel like
Compliments.
the cinematography here does that really well. There's some
Yes.
gorgeous scenes, like some gorgeous stills. You could
Yes.
just take a screenshot of one scene. Like I wrote down, there's one where they have a bagpiper playing on the docks and the sun is rising, and it's like a
Mm,
gorgeous. I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like a desktop background, right? There's some gorgeous scenes here, but it's not overpowering. It's just these like small establishing shots here and there. And then um one of the choices I absolutely loved is the all of basically how it's filmed with Neil after he has the moment with his parents leading up to him shooting himself. And I feel like it's fair to talk about that because I think it's expected we are going to have spoilers here. uh,
this is fair. Yes. Yes. You've had enough time
yeah.
since, like 40 plus years or
Yeah.
whatever.
Um, so yeah, I loved how it was this like long drawn out scene that leads up to it, and then you have it build to this moment where you don't even hear the gunshot. It has this like kind of like ambient
Yes.
sound playing all throughout it. It's like building, and you're like waiting for the tension to break. And how it breaks that tension is with just the dad sitting up in bed and going, "What was that?" Oh my gosh, I loved
Yes.
that. And then
Yes.
all of the following the father, looking through, all the way to when the mom is saying like, "He's all right, he's all right, he's all right."
He's over.
Oh, that just broke me. The way it was done was so well done to where you have it's subtle enough, it's not overpowering, it's not like hitting you in the face with anything. Like I feel like a cheaper movie would have had you see the moment, right? At the
Yeah.
very least hear the moment, but I don't know, the way that you don't know, like I mean you know what's happening, but you don't hear it at all. It just I don't know, it hits harder that way. Um
Well, you get to experience it like they do
yeah.
because of how they film it. Like you hear the father waking up,
Mhm.
and you're like, did I hear anything? And
Mhm.
he's thinking, did I hear anything? Because he's asleep. So he didn't really hear this over because the gunshot would be loud, but if you're asleep,
Right.
you just woke up and you're like, what do I even hear? And so then they take you through the experience that they're going through of searching and going through all this stuff. And yeah, it just it puts you in their shoes a bit more for the scene, which
Mhm.
makes it more powerful. Um, and even the fact that, they just had this huge argument, and even though we've established that the father's kind of a dick, he has his reasons for it, but, we don't necessarily like him as a character. Um, the mom seems to have a bit more heart in the few scenes that we get with her, but nonetheless, it still takes you through and puts you in their shoes and takes you through those emotions in a much more powerful and visceral way, I think, than if you had just seen it in some other way. So I think that was well done. Yeah.
I agree completely. And another, uh, speaking of the mom, I forgot about that, but where they like hold on the shoes, you see she's visibly upset climbing into bed, and then they like zoom in on the dad taking off his shoes, and then they hold the shot on the shoes as they turn off the lights, and then you just hear the mom crying. Like it's so it's such an interesting choice, I think, to not have you see these things, to not hear the gunshot, to not see her cry, to not be directly following them while they're doing it. And especially because this is a movie that does use close-ups a lot, right? Anytime Robin Williams is like talking to the boys, it's just a close-up of him, of one face back to him and another face, and seeing their reactions. Because that's really like all you need for a great scene is just, when you have that many good performers, all you need is the face. That is it, right? And just let them do what they're doing and let the camera just follow them. But then it does have those moments where it's really heavy and it intentionally chooses not to have you see the characters in those moments. Um, I just think it's a really well done balance of that, where you're not overdoing it, following all the characters and their reactions, but it's almost like in the moments that you feel like it should matter more, they choose not to, and it makes it more impactful.
Yes, totally agree. Totally agree. Um, Circling back, because I know we can probably take the Neil piece of it and take it into some of the themes and stuff like that, because I think that's
Mhm.
there's a lot to unpack there. But real quick before we do that, you mentioned the cinematography and some of those things, and I agree. I think that was subtly well, really good. There's just, like I said, this is a sprinkling, like you said, of these shots, but they're beautiful and they totally put you in the place where it's happening. It makes you feel like you're there, and it just makes the place feel more real. Where this classic sort of New England boarding school, um,
Mhm.
these shots of fall, or these this dead of winter and snow, and all these shots, and there's these scenes with the birds a couple of times, which I'm sure there's some symbolism in there. I love when the I don't know, maybe this is me overthinking it, but the shot where it's Knox. Knox
Mm.
is on the bike, um, and
Yes.
he's going out to dinner, and he's feeling the sense of freedom, and he goes and disrupts the birds, and this is a group of birds that we've seen in an earlier shot of the cinematography flying in unison together, and then he alone on his bike with this sense of freedom comes in and just sort of disturbs the flock.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know, I just thought that was kinda cool and kind of fit in with the whole montage of individualism and working with the group and everything. I just thought it was cool, and it's fitting it in there with the cinematography in some of those shots that was just very subtle.
No, I think you're 100% right, and I don't think you're overthinking it all at all. I think we can tie this right into talking about the themes of the movie, too, because going back to the early bird shots you're talking about when they're all flying in unison, a lot of those early shots in the movie, I didn't realize at the time how important they would be later. Like I kind of figured on some of them. Like one of the first shots is they uh, have the close up of the tradition banner
Yeah.
being raised, right? They have the four tenets, but the close up is of the tradition banner as it's being lifted and hoisted into the room in that first opening sequence. One of the first shots. And then you have, I think, I feel like more of these scenes where you have people just doing things in unison, right? Doing having the whole ceremony, and it's all very structured and everyone's standing up when they're supposed to. And you even have Ethan Hawke's character not knowing he's supposed to stand upright and his parents kind of elbowing him, get in line, right? And then, yeah, you have like a shot where all the boys are just like going down a hallway in line, and it just seems very. It's really establishing the rigidity
Mhm.
of this place where everyone's at. And then every now and then you will get a little bit of chaos in it, but it's not truly awoken yet. Like I feel like later on we get a lot more shots that are really chaotic, and they start using that spinning camera.
Yes. Yes. There's a stairwell shot where it cuts from it's actually it's a bird scene. It cuts from a scene
Mhm.
with the birds, and it goes and you hear them all, squawking, basically, this noise, and it cuts right to a stairwell circle shot, with the
Mhm.
students all in the stairwell, all yelling. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And then it continues to do the circling camera, right? They do it again. When is it? They do it again when Ethan Hawke's, I just keep wanting to call him Ethan Hawke, not by his
God,
character
yeah, yeah,
name.
yeah.
Yeah, Todd. When Todd gets his poem stolen by
Yes.
Neil, and they're going around, and then like another boy comes in and they steal his chemistry book. It's the whole time the circle is just rotating around the room, following them, right? Like giving this sense of chaos, and then it does it again in the scene we talked about earlier with Todd Anderson, where he's, Robin Williams has him, and he's, close your eyes, picture what's in your head. The whole time they're walking in a circle, and the camera's just following them in a loop. Um, and there was one other time, I think later on, it did it again. So I just made note. I was like, they really like spinning cameras in this in this movie, but it was all done, I feel like, with a purpose, getting to like the grander theme of disrupting this order. So I really appreciated that choice as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get some of the themes here. Yeah. Yeah. I The theme's fascinating. Obviously, I find it I mean, some of it's obvious, right? We've already talked about a lot of it, about this idea of like individualism and thinking for yourself. And the great, conflict here is that the administration of the school and many of the teachers and many of the parents are do not believe that these 17-year-olds and younger are capable of thinking for themselves. Robin Williams character Keating obviously feels differently, and that's where the conflict comes, and you see this group of students coming from one perspective to the other and grappling with it to varying degrees. Some of whom ultimately go back when push comes to shove and the pressure's on. They go back to their structure and rigidity, and some break out. I find the most fascinating parts about it the line about how far to go and not. And there's some moments in here about that. There's the whole Charlie scene.
Mhm.
Where he puts the ad in the newspaper, the story in the newspaper, didn't tell anyone, just to ruffle feathers. And then in the assembly where they're being asked about it, he brings out the phone and he says it's God. He says there should be girls. And then we have the scene where Robin Williams, comes and talks to them later that evening, presumably that evening, and basically tells them, look, use your head here. Don't be stupid. Use your head. There's a time and a place, and but then you get obviously some more stuff with Neil and how far is too far with his character. I don't know. It's just it's a really interesting thing about what that line is, and I don't think. Well, before I say more, I'm curious what your thoughts are.
No, I agree completely. Because the four principals, they hold it. I keep wanting to call it Chilton because that's the school in Gilmore Girls. Um, and it will end with an LTON, I guess. So Welton, the four principles they hold at Welton are tradition, discipline, honor, and excellence, I believe. Which on their own are not bad things, right? Tradition is not a bad thing to hold. Honor is definitely not a bad thing. Discipline is not a bad thing. Excellence is not a bad thing. But neither is free thinking. And seemingly these things are at odds with each other, but they're really not. What's at odds is when people hold them to such an extreme that they sacrifice the other, right? When
Right.
people hold tradition and discipline and excellence in such a high regard, they're willing to sacrifice free thinking for everything to be in order. And when people are so wanting to break the mold and push boundaries that they have no regard for honor or excellence, right? Which is where Charlie starts to trend to, right?
Right.
He starts to lose some of that keep honoring the institution he's at, right? Because there is a way to push things forward and search for progress without dishonoring the good things, right? And I think Robin Williams' character knows that, and he recognizes in Charlie when he has that talk with him that he is taking it too far. And I wrote down, I was like, I like that Keating is shown to be reasonable because I feel like a lesser movie wouldn't have let one of the characters take it too far, right? When you have this like inspirational character, you don't really want their messages to be misconstrued because that almost makes it seem like the character who originated it might be at fault.
And it almost dilutes the dogma of it, right? It's like, here we're talking about this thing, and if there's a problem with this thing, then that really undermines the inspiration of it,
Hmm.
You're right.
Yeah, so a lesser movie I don't think would have gone there, but I think Dead Poet Society does it really well, and it shows the importance of balance, right? Of having a good handle on both things and being able to wield them well without having to, completely dismantle everything around you and offend everyone, around you. You're not going to get far doing things that way. And if we look at the reason why Robin Williams is or Keating is pushing these things is because he believes that it would lead to a more fulfilling life, right? That's the whole message of Carpe Diem, is make the most of your life and be fulfilled in it. If you take his lessons too far and just try to disrupt everything around you and kind of cause chaos and question things just to be questioned without any actual purpose behind it, then you're probably not going to end up finding your life very fulfilling, right? You won't have any fruit for your labors. You're likely to piss off everyone around you. You know what I mean? You're doing more harm than good at that point. And so the crux of it is really so that you can have this more fulfilling life. And the way that Charlie is taking it is not for that purpose. It's not for fulfillment. It's not for betterment. It's just for this kind of like rebelliousness that he already had in him. And I think hearing Keating's lectures just kind of like really awoken, and it almost was like being given permission, right? I think that's how
Yeah.
he took it. He's like, oh, well, this teacher thinks this way, so it's kind of giving me permission to do these things. And then even when Robin Williams is talking to him in that one scene, at first he's like, oh, not you too, Keating, you're siding with Nolan, right? Because he does see it as two sides. He sees it as two extremes. He doesn't see the middle ground, until
Yes.
Robin Williams is like, sucking the marrow out of life doesn't mean choking on the bone, which I love that line. And then even at the end, I think he's able to still resonate with Charlie because he throws in the humor. He knows that, right, this is the way that Charlie responds to the world around him is with humor. So, at the end, he does the, if you'd made it collect, it would have been daring.
Right,
Um,
right. No,
to really like make, I think, to foster the connection, because I'm sure Charlie has been lectured enough times that if Keating was just another guy coming in and lecturing him and that was all it wouldn't have stuck.
right.
I also like that they still made Charlie's character have like an integrity move of after he gets, the paddling, he doesn't give up the rest of the gang, right? He still is like he put the Dead Poet Society name out there without their permission, without their consent. But then as soon as the backlash comes back on him, he's willing to take the full brunt of it himself because the other guys didn't sign up for that. He did. So I do like that they still had him have that integrity move at the end of the day.
Right.
I think he was probably one of the more interesting characters to me.
Yeah, I would agree. He goes on a journey for sure, and it takes some twists and turns. Um, and it kind of circles back to around what you were kind of like. There's some Keating in him as well.
Mhm.
And I think we get to see that by the
Well,
end.
their stories kind of end up the same way too.
Yes.
Like Charlie ends up expelled, and we don't really know what happens to him. Like
Right.
I'm assuming he's all right by the end of it, but he's one we don't really get his loose end tied up. And then Keating, right, ends up getting let go. So they're both kind of the people who get the short end of the stick
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. But
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. I want to know what you think about, so taking that same concept of how far do you take it, this principle and this idea, this carpe diem, this seize the day, and living your life for the fulfillment to the fullest. So then put it into Neil's situation. I'm curious.
so, I mean, I don't think that what Neil did was I don't think it was Keating's fault, obviously. I think that it wasn't even in the vein of what Keating was trying to teach. I think and then where you see it, I think it's that Neil doesn't realize he has options,
Right.
and they even see that in the room when he's talking to Keating, right? He's like, "There's got to be an easier way," and Keating's like, "Nope, you have to talk to your father," and he says, "I'm trapped," and Keating's like, no, you're not.
Right.
Like he even says it there, right? Keating's trying to help him realize that he is not trapped. I think that Neil's problem is he doesn't believe that, and he can't let himself believe that, and he can't see himself playing the long game of even like placating for a little bit, right?
Right.
Which I don't know. I mean, I can kind of relate with Neil a little bit on a much less extreme level. But with the overbearing parents and not feeling like you are allowed to live a life that suits them, right? So you kind of have to play the long game and just wait until you're at a point when you can make your own decisions.
Right.
And it sounds so cliche, but it does get better in the long run. But in the moment, it does feel very trapping. It feels like, I remember when he said that I'm trapped and he had like tears in his eyes, I started to get choked up because I remember feeling like that, feeling like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm trapped and I have no options and no way out. Um, but it really requires patience in those situations, and I think that's not something that Neil was. Oh, I mean, I'm sure he was aware of it, but I don't think it was something he was really willing to do. I don't know if that really answers your question, but
No, it
those are
does,
kind of
it
like my
does.
thoughts on
I think
it.
it's just an interest it does. It's just it's an interesting it's the same thing, but in a different form from a different it's not someone who's trying to rebel. They honestly just wanted to go they'd be fine following the rules, they just wanna do, what, he wants to do what fulfills him, and
Mhm.
you're right, he can't see the end game from it. I think the piece that Neil misses, is that carpe diem is and this ideology that Keating has been teaching these kids does not only exist when you can just do whatever you want, but it also exists when you
Mhm.
can't. Um, and there's a spirit and a dignity within that, even when you can't do exactly what you want to. Obviously, Keating ends up getting fired. He doesn't just like go burn the place down or do whatever, right? Like this, he still exists in a world where there are people with authority over him that can make decisions. And then he goes, but he still maintains the dignity and the spirit with, I don't know. I think that's just the piece that Neil misses there is that even in the circumstances that are obviously terrible and his father is not getting it, is doing a lot wrong, he can still have that within those circumstances. And like you said, play the long game for that and find more of that. And anyway, those were some of the thoughts that I was going through as I was watching those scenes. Um, just thinking, it's such a shame that he only took it to the outcomes rather than
Mhm.
like this is something that's internal, that you carry with you no matter what is going on around you. You can still have
Mhm.
this, and maintain this, and no one else can crush this. Um, but then again, he's a 17-year-old, kid, who is processing a lot. So, that makes him feel very real, as a character, and you so empathize with him in the situations and the idea. I don't know how the logistics because his father talks in that scene about going to military school and then he says something about 10 years and I'm like, "What? Is that real?" Like, I don't actually know enough to know that, but I'm like, "Can someone actually sign you up as a 17-year-old and you're committed for 10 years when you're an adult?" That seems
I
crazy, but
I don't remember the actual words he says, but I think he might be talking about medicals, right? Like the medical school part of it, because I know that's what his dad wants him to do. So like it would be 10 years once he gets out of
oh,
medical
maybe
school.
okay.
Like, cause his dad at the very beginning, right, when he's like, "I can't quit school paper, I'm gonna be assistant editor this year," or whatever,
Yeah,
and his dad's like, "Well, when you're an adult and you're out of medical school and you're a doctor, you can make your own decisions." So
right,
it's not even his dad isn't viewing it as once you're 18, you can make your own decisions. It's like we are putting you through medical school, and once you're done with medical school, then you can make your own decisions. So
right,
I think that's what he was referencing there, not necessarily that he's gonna be in like military school for 10 years, but just that he
I
will
got
be
you, I got you.
under his father's thumb for 10 more years.
Right. Well, that
Um,
makes more sense then.
yeah.
Yeah,
Either way though, right? It's yeah, I mean I can see why he feels very trapped by it. And I honestly don't even know, like I was talking about, oh, he's not playing the long game, right? He does it's not something he's really like seeing as a complete option for him. I mean, if you're I don't know, can your parents make you go to medical school? I mean, I guess like if they're paying for it, they can refuse to pay. I don't know. I just was thinking, I was like, I feel like you need to have more conversations about this, right? Like, what are the consequences if you never apply for medical school, then you never apply for medical school.
Right. Right.
So I don't know. Yeah. But those were conversations he wasn't willing to have, right? Because we see his father's like, well, then tell me what you want. And he
doesn't even say
clams up
he
and
can't do
says
it.
nothing.
Yeah.
He can't even,
He resigns himself to the fate rather than trying to do something different, which I guess in a way you could say does go against what, he's been being taught by Keating this time about continuing to walk at your own pace, in your own stride. Anyway, just thought it's a fascinating exploration of the concept and the ideology from a very different perspective than Charlie's.
I also thought an interesting ideology that is revealed at kind of like the end once everything's hit the fan is Keating's whole thing, right, is find your own path, set your own way, and do things your way. Follow your own path, follow your own journey. Don't let other people set it for you. That's his whole message, right? And then at the end, when they're doing this inquiry, it's all framed of like Keating did this, right? Keating is the one who encouraged Neil to go to acting school. Keating is the one who, I don't know, it's probably not as subtle as I'm making it sound. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that it's ironic that it's the exact opposite, right? That they don't. It doesn't seem like Nolan or anyone else even considers like maybe he was just telling them to do what they want. Maybe Neil actually just wanted to be an actor.
Right. It's the fact that we obviously, if someone's telling them what to do because they can't think for themselves, so they must be getting this from somewhere else because that's how we operate. So that's how he must be operating.
Yeah. It's like their own ideology is what kind of causes Keating's downfall because they can't accept the fact that these people might have actually chosen to do these things on their own.
Right.
That they have any agency in their lives whatsoever.
Right.
Just kind of like it's this big circle, right? It goes around and around. I want to say I know this movie has gotten a little bit of flack for like the whitewashing, right? It's like it's a very like white male cast. I kind of think that's hogwash because that's kind of the point, right? Like they're like it's in the 1950s for one, in a very well-to-do like all boys academy.
Yeah, in Vermont. Yeah,
in Vermont, like that's kind of what the setting is, right? But I think if you want to dig into it a little bit, when you think about the timelines of this, I can't remember when this takes place. It's like 1959, I think, or like 1956, something like that, late 1950s ish. The free thinking message that Keating is really trying to, embody these boys with, is going to, I think, play an interesting role if you were to follow their stories, right? Going into like the 1960s, where you're having these like race riots and these changing times in America, right? And you start to get more of these like feminism movements and things like that. I think those free thinking messages would play really interesting into the like where America is headed in the next decade.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's interesting that you can kind of play it as Keating. He obviously doesn't know what's ahead. He doesn't know that, but these types of messages that these boys are being taught and that they're really like leaning into, I feel like play really well into where America is headed. So if you want to think of it from that angle, it is kind of more forward thinking than a lot of people give it credit for.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was anything on the minds of people making the movie, but it's something that I considered. I was like, I don't know. I feel like this is a message that a lot of people probably in like late 1950s America needed to hear.
Right.
And a lot of people probably didn't. So
well, I was gonna say, I think too, I mean, the whole point of this school is that there is not diversity in both people and thought, right?
Right.
And so the demographics being very similar, very, very similar, only feeds into that this is a group that is all, for the most part, here for the same reasons, from the same types of backgrounds, and we are all going to do what we're told, and there's one way to do things.
Mhm.
And so I kind of feel like, yeah, it does contribute to the whole problem that's going on,
Mhm.
and what's trying to be broken, by Keating's character. So yeah, I would agree. I think it actually does fit quite well, the demographics of the cast and everything like that, and the characters and everything. It just fits the story even it makes it even more so.
Mhm. This is a little bit unrelated. Have you seen Mona Lisa Smile?
I have not. No.
Okay, okay. Um, it's very similar.
Okay.
I had not seen Dead Poet Society, but I had seen Mona Lisa Smile. And the very first part of this movie, I was like, huh, this is kind of a similar concept. Because it's Julia Roberts, right, is this art teacher who's coming to this new all girls school in like the 40s in like Vermont or something. And she's a little bit, what's the word? Anti orthodox, and she like inspires these students to think for themselves, and it was just, there were almost scenes that it felt like a one-to-one comparison, and I had to keep reminding myself Mona Lisa Smile is a ripoff of this, not the other way around. Because I Mona Lisa Smile first, I was like, oh, this is kind of just like what they did in Mona Lisa Smile. And then I had to remind myself, nope, they did this first. If one is a ripoff of the other, it's the other way around. But
That's so
sorry, just
fun.
talking about like the demographics all being the same. It's very similar, but it's just all
Which is all
a bunch
girl
of
version.
all
Yeah,
girls version of the same movie, basically.
that's funny. I did just from a random thing. Richard's character, um, he, it's so fascinating to see how he is part of their group and does whatever. But when push comes to shove, he does ultimately go back to the way that he was taught to think before,
Hmm.
and rats them out and does everything. And the line, which is a great line, is like, "You can't save Keating, but you can save yourselves." After he's sitting there with the bloody nose and everything like that,
Yeah.
defiantly still like he ends up trying to make it out about like it's the honor code and everything like that.
Hmm.
And but ultimately comes down to but you can save yourselves, and that's what he's always trying to do. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's just funny.
Yeah. I thought it was a little bit interesting that they do all at the end ultimately end up giving Keating up and saving themselves, which
Yes.
I can't really blame them for, to be quite honest. Like at that point, the administration does know everything, right? What's going to happen is going to happen. And whether or not they gave Keating up really wouldn't change the outcome. But I did think that was an interesting choice still,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a little bit against the message of the film, right? To think for yourself, to not just conform to, right? Robin Williams, when he's doing the whole walking class, even says, right, have your own beliefs, even when everyone is against you, even when it's really hard, even when it seems impossible, still have your own walk. And then at the very end of the movie, we do have them kind of just go with the flow because it's the easier outcome.
Yeah.
And like I said, logical sense, I really can't blame them for it. I think I probably would have done the same thing in their shoes, but at the same time it does feel like it's against the themes of the movie. But then of course it all leads to the "Oh Captain, My Captain" scene, so it's a nice
Right.
payoff
Well,
at
I
the end.
think it's some I think it's a nice way to show I think it makes it more real in a sense, because there's not that they just don't just get it. And they're still kids, they're still learning,
Hmm.
and there's still real world consequences, and they still are like, this is not gonna be something that's fully formed even yet. Like, it's something that they're taking with them through the rest of their lives. And
Right.
so even afterwards, as they've made this choice, and then they are all seemingly regretting it, and then they come around to this moment where they do the "Oh, Captain, My Captain," and they have a moment of defiance. But it's like, even in the end here, they're still
Hmm.
grappling with this, as all the characters have, throughout, because they're just 17-year-old kids learning, you know? I don't know. I
Right.
kinda like it in a sense, that they didn't just get it and it didn't just click,
Mm-hmm.
immediately, that they're still learning, they're still, succumbing to the pressure to walk like everyone else for their own benefit. But that they still but you see at the end, you still get the moment where you can see that they have gotten it, and you can see what they will probably do with it moving forward. It's not about what it is
Mm-hmm.
now necessarily, it's what it will become for them, which is the whole point that Keating was going for. It's not necessarily what they do right here, right now. They're still learning that they're gonna make
Right.
mistakes. They're gonna have the ups and downs of it. I don't know. Yeah, but you're right. It's an interesting choice. It's not this
Mhm.
moment where they all stand up, except for Charlie. Charlie's the only one who does,
Right.
which fits his character because he was the one who did it all throughout. Um, Perhaps even too far,
Right.
but was not afraid to die on that principle.
Yeah. All right. Well, if that's all we have for this, then we can play our ending games.
Heck yeah.
So, casting call. There's a lot of casts in this. So, this is if they were to remake the film today, who would be cast the main roles? There are a lot of main roles. So, I don't know if we should just stick with Keating.
Yeah, I was gonna say for him, I struggle with Robin Williams. Like, I don't know how you can replace Robin Williams. I did read that they considered Mel Gibson and Liam Neeson as alternate casts for that role. I cannot imagine either one of them doing that. Can you imagine Mel Gibson
I absolutely cannot.
trying to do that role? To be like, it's just no, man. That movie would be a failure. No offense to Mel Gibson or or Liam Neeson, but like there's no way that they could have the type of
No,
charisma and
absolutely
heart
not.
to play that. It's such a nuance. This is a nuanced role that
Hmm.
I just
So, I just had to look it up because I thought I read too. Dustin Hoffman was also considered for the role. Which
wow.
I feel like Dustin Hoffman
Okay,
would be a better choice than
it's a closer one.
Mel Gibson
That's a
for sure.
closer one.
But I still don't think like he
Yeah,
would have brought the same elements that Robin Williams did. I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone who has heart and humor and also like a dignity about them. Um,
yeah.
they just don't make them like Robin Williams anymore.
No, that's fair. That is fair. The one who I would say who could do it wouldn't be the same type of performance, but it would be I could see someone doing a mix of heart and humor would be Jason Sudeikis.
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
I
Like a
could
Ted. I mean, he did do
I
Ted
could
Lasso. I feel like it's a similar type of character.
a
Yeah.
similar type, yes, where they just have this thing about them that they can be funny and full of heart and just different and can beat or can march to the beat of their own drum. And I think that would be my pick if I had to pick, but I don't want to
Right.
pick.
Yeah. For the sake of having someone different, I'm gonna. This is I don't know. This probably is a terrible pick. Uh, I'm gonna say Steve Carell. Just because I'm a
Okay,
Steve
okay.
Carell
No, no, no. I
stan
can
for
see that.
one. So yeah, no, I think he brings the heart and the humor. I don't know if he would have quite the same like the soft dignity about him and the approachableness to him that Robin Williams did, but yeah, I guess just for the sake of having a
Yeah.
different pick, that's who I would pick,
No, that's
Steve
fair.
Carell.
That's
But
fair.
I don't think you can beat
Uh,
Robin Williams.
do you want to do one more? Do you
Mhm.
want to do
Sure,
Todd? You want to do
Ethan
Ethan
Hawke,
Hawke?
Todd Anderson, yeah.
Ethan Hawke's great in this, by the way. It's so fun to see him as a younger version of himself. It's such a great performance as a young actor. And you can see obviously what he's going to bring into films in the future. But um, yeah, yeah. You can take this one first if you want, since I stole
Oh
Jason Sudeikis from you last.
no, no, you're good. Um, I don't know. You might have to go first because part of me feels like this character should almost be an unknown because Ethan Hawke at the time, right, was like an unknown, and now we watch him with the knowledge looking back. But I don't know. I feel like it's one that in my ideal world I would cast someone who probably hadn't done much, if anything, before this. But
Um, I could see Timothy Chalamet doing this role in a similar way. He's a bit old. He's also 28, but he's young enough and looks young enough that I feel like he could do it, or could have done it in the past. Um, and I could see him playing sort of an angsty kid who cannot find their voice. So that's my pick.
So it's interesting you say that. Have you ever heard of Prodigal Son?
No.
Um, I've never seen it, like the play, but it's a play that I know Timothy Chalamet did when he was younger, and he played. It was like a very similar character to. I don't know if it would have been Ethan Hawke's character because I don't know a ton about the play, but I've seen basically this one monologue that he did where he's like talking to the headmaster of the school, and he feels just like stifled, and he's like, I can't remember any of the lines from it, but he's saying like something along the lines of like you're wanting me to make these decisions and I don't even know who I am. He's just like having this full like little breakdown where he's like, I'm just trying to figure out who I am, and like I can't be everything you expect of me. Um,
Yeah.
so I feel like that role is a very similar type of role that you would see in a Dead Poet Society. So it's interesting you say that. Yeah, I think after having seen that little monologue, you have to look it up. I think the monologue is called like "Someone Saw Me," but you can just look up like Timothy Chalamet and Prodigal Son, and his performance in there. I feel like is very fitting for that role.
Yeah.
Uh, for my answer, I'm gonna go with Noah Schnapp. Is that how you? Yeah, Noah Schnapp. I think is his name. Who plays Will in Stranger Things? Just because I feel like the quiet, feeling insecure kind of role fits here. He would have to like step into his confidence a little bit more than we see Will traditionally do in Stranger Things, but I feel like at least for the first part
Yeah.
of the movie, I could see him now that he's a little bit older
Yeah.
too, playing
It's
that
fair. He's
playing that
almost the
role.
same age as Ethan Hawke was when Ethan Hawke
Okay,
did this role too, for what it's worth.
there we go.
So
Perfect. We got time to age into it.
say yes. Finally, when you do some movie recommendations off of this, if you like this movie, what else would you like? I feel like, I mean, this is kind of a coming. There's some coming of age stuff in this, but I don't think I was trying to think about other coming of age movies and or stuff with some, and I don't feel like any of them are super analogous in this way, at least to me, not for the feel of this movie. Um, I thought of some stuff like Stand By Me, um, or just some other stuff like that. I feel like you got to go for more of a Robin Williams type of movie
I feel
to
like you're gonna
capture the
steal my
feel.
recommendation.
Well,
No, go
here,
ahead.
I'll
Go
let you
ahead.
go first, and
Yeah.
I'll take. I can take it. Well, I feel like the obvious one is Good Will Hunting, right? Good Will Hunting is the obvious one that has this same type of feel where it's the same thing. It's Robin Williams, not instead of working with a whole class, he's working with one person, but he's trying to unlock something. And he's relating to them. He sees himself, in a character, and is trying to unlock this thing that, this Matt Damon's character in Good Will Hunting does not want to go there or do, and doesn't realize he needs to. And it's the same type of thing. So that's the obvious one.
And
So
it's got the setting too. They're
it's
both
got,
the New England,
yeah,
like the fall.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, I was gonna say another one that has some similar themes though, is Good Morning Vietnam. Um, Very different setting, lots of different stakes going on, but it's still Robin Williams doing his typical type of thing, and it's also Robin Williams having sort of a defiant spirit and trying to give something that the institution at large is trying to take away. Um, and he has to, take some stands on some stuff and go against the rules in some for some reasons that he believes in. His character's a little bit less magnanimous, I guess, in it. There's a slightly less. I don't think he realizes in Good Morning Vietnam quite so much of the impact that he's trying to make. I think he's more doing and then is realizing a little bit later, rather than his character Keating here, who knows all along what he's trying to do. But it's a similar type of feel in terms of him going against the grain to comedic and sometimes devastating effects. So yeah,
I have not
that'll
I
be
have
my
not seen Good Morning Vietnam, so I might have to follow take your recommendation. Um, so I'll recommend obviously Good Will Hunting is the easy one. I'll recommend two others. So Mona Lisa Smile is one that I said was felt at times a little bit like a ripoff of it. And if you've seen this movie first and love it, you actually might think Mona Lisa is a cheap movie. So maybe I recommend it with a grain of salt. If you're okay watching something that is very clearly trying to emulate what Dead Poet Society did, give it a watch. I did enjoy Mona Lisa Smile. I think the performances are still really good, and I think it's written really well. So, yeah, take that for what it's worth. And then the other movie I'll recommend, which is a more different, but it is still that coming of age, and it's a little bit about um, awakening something in you and being like a full participant in your life rather than just like someone sitting on the sidelines watching it go by. Is Perks of Being a Wallflower, which
mm,
is one of my favorite coming of age books and
mm,
movies. Um, but I feel like it takes place like kind of from like I think fall. It takes place over basically a school year, but it's got a lot of shots in like this fall, winter, Christmas time. So it's got a somewhat of a similar feel. Uh, yeah, and then you've got the main character Charlie is really into English as well, so you've got some literature references and things like that. So they felt a little bit in the same vein. I think they're both enjoyable watches.
yeah. I have not seen either one of those, so I may have to take your recommendations on those and give those a good watch. Especially you've talked so much about Perks of Being a Wallflower that I feel like that I've got to add that to my list.
We're gonna have to do it on this podcast. So
That hey, you know what? If that's the motivation we need, then that's what we got to do.
all right, good deal. Well, it has been lovely breaking down Dead Poet Society, and it was a lovely watch. Very enjoyable, and I'll probably end up rewatching it. I would assume like within the week.
That's awesome. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Well, this has
right.
been fun.
See you next time. It's been real.